Late at night at Avalon Law Firm, a horrific massacre had taken place. Bodies were left dismembered, while blood was scattered throughout the office. In the middle of the chaos, a man was cornered as he pleaded with the looming shadow to stop. He begged for her to stay away from him, but the shadow slowly reached out toward him, leaving the man screaming in terror at the monster before him. The story began with Sakura standing in front of a colossal office building. As she gazed up at its towering height, she felt both amazed and relieved that she had managed to secure a job at such a large company in the city. She firmly assured herself that she would do her best from that day onward, recalling the promise she had made to her mother before stepping inside the building. She moved toward the floor guide to confirm the correct department and soon found the listing for Egao Corporation on the 11th to 13th floors. Deciding to head for the elevator, she suddenly found herself caught in a rush of people pouring out from the hallway. The crowd brushed past her, causing her to stumble as her purse slipped from her grasp, scattering her belongings across the floor. One of the security guards turned toward her and asked if she was all right. Sakura quickly apologized for causing trouble while gathering her belongings. While helping her pick up her things, a man noticed her CD player and remarked that it looked rather old. Sakura grew slightly embarrassed and explained that it had originally belonged to her father. Since she did not own a phone, it was the only way she could listen to music. The man responded that it was good to take care of meaningful belongings like that. He then mentioned that they had apparently met during training, though Sakura hesitated as she struggled to remember him. The man introduced himself as Toma Yamazaki, stating that he was also a new employee at Egao Corporation. Hearing this, Sakura brightened and apologized for not realizing it sooner before introducing herself as Minami Sakura. Sakura thanked the security guard, expressing her gratitude for his help. The guard simply remarked that it was nothing worth mentioning. As Yamazaki and Sakura walked away, the guard quietly watched them leave. Later, during the employee gathering, the newcomers were introduced to their seniors. The president remarked that he hoped the seniors would watch over the newcomers with both strictness and warmth while supporting them wholeheartedly. The president of Egao Corporation, Mitsuhiko Kujo, then declared that they should show the world where their energy came from, their smiling faces, and encouraged everyone to do as they always did. Without warning, he burst into loud laughter, soon joined by the other employees, leaving the newcomers stunned. Mitsuhiko noticed their reactions and questioned whether they were surprised. He explained that every morning the employees gathered together and laughed as loudly as they could. According to him, laughter activated natural killer cells that reduced the risk of cancer and infectious diseases. Since the company dealt with health foods, unhealthy employees would only make customers distrust their products. He then encouraged the newcomers to join in and laugh as hard as they could. Convinced that she should give her all as an employee, she forced herself to laugh as enthusiastically as possible, prompting Mitsuhiko to praise her efforts and encourage her to continue. Afterwards, Sakura was assigned to a team and asked to introduce herself. Though slightly nervous, she politely stated that she would do her best to adapt to her work environment and would continue learning under their guidance. She then offered a small gift from Yamagata, where she came from, asking her team leader to kindly accept it. The team leader thanked her and complimented her thoughtfulness, remarking that they would receive it later. He then asked the others to introduce themselves as well. One employee introduced himself as Kudo, encouraging her to relax. Another woman introduced herself as Kurowa and kindly stated that she could ask her for help whenever she did not understand something. A bulked man also introduced himself as Mogi, remarking that it was nice to have another woman on the team. Another girl introduced herself as Takanashi and cheerfully commented that she was happy to have someone close to her age joining them. Finally, the group leader introduced himself as Kuzehara and stated that the six of them would work hard together as a team from then onward. Sakura bowed politely to everyone, feeling delighted that they all appeared so kind. As she glanced to the side, she noticed that Yamazaki had been placed in another group nearby. Quietly, she resolved to do her best to contribute to the company. Kuzehara then remarked that although it might seem sudden, he already had her first task ready. He explained that she should first become familiar with the office and asked her to prepare tea for everyone.
The other team members also mentioned the drinks they preferred, and Sakura carefully took note of each request before heading toward the pantry. As Sakura reached for items from the upper drawer, she tried to recall the drinks each team member had requested. From behind, Kuzehara entered the pantry and informed her that his drink was placed further inside. Sakura nodded in acknowledgement and attempted to reach for it. Kuzehara stepped closer and questioned whether she could not reach it properly. Offering his assistance, he remarked that he would help her. However, Sakura suddenly felt an odd sensation when she noticed his hand brushing against her bottom. Kuzehara casually retrieved his drink and handed it to her, asking her to bring it along. Sakura thanked him, though an uneasy feeling lingered in her mind as she wondered if the touch had truly been accidental. Later, while everyone worked, Kuzehara spoke about his family, mentioning that his daughter would be taking her high school entrance exams that year. He explained that his wife had been constantly anxious because of it, so he had been helping around the house whenever he could. Hearing this, Sakura began to convince herself that perhaps she had imagined things earlier, since he sounded like someone who genuinely cared about his family. At that moment, Kurowa called out to Sakura. Sakura quickly responded, politely asking Kurowa to take care of her from then onward. Kurowa explained that their group mainly handled inventory control and questioned whether Sakura knew how to use a computer. Embarrassed, Sakura admitted that she did not know much about it at all. Kurowa reassured her kindly, stating that anyone could learn quickly once properly taught, and encouraged her not to worry about it. Sakura brightened immediately, feeling grateful to have such a considerate senior and thanked her sincerely. At noon, Kuro suddenly stood up and declared that it was finally lunchtime. He called out to Sakura and suggested that they go eat together. However, Sakura apologized softly and explained that she had brought her own lunch. Kuro jokingly remarked that she was far too boring, causing Takanashi to laugh and tease that he had been completely rejected. Soon afterwards, Mogi approached from behind and wrapped his arms around Kuro's shoulders, insisting that they should go out to eat instead. Kuro protested, arguing that they had already gone out for yakiniku the previous day. Ignoring his complaints, Mogi dragged him away while enthusiastically declaring that they would be eating meat again tomorrow and the day after. Once the others left, Sakura quietly opened her lunchbox and began eating. Suddenly, Yamazaki appeared from behind and questioned whether it was a homemade lunch, remarking that it looked delicious. Sakura appeared surprised to see him there. Yamazaki casually explained that he had only bought an onigiri from a convenience store to save money and suggested that they eat together. Sakura happily agreed and invited him to sit down. From a short distance away, Kurowa silently observed the two of them. Noticing the CD player beside her, Yamazaki remarked that it was the same portable CD player from earlier that morning and questioned what she had been listening to. Sakura hesitated but explained that the CD had been given to her by a street musician from her hometown. She stated that the honest lyrics had deeply moved her and often comforted her whenever she was struggling. Yamazaki gently questioned whether something difficult had happened to her, but Sakura quickly denied it. Before the conversation could continue, suddenly Kurowa called out to Sakura and asked her to buy lunch on her behalf. She requested an unsalted croissant from Echide Maison du Beurre, along with a grande soy milk from Starbucks. Immediately, Yamazaki pointed out that Sakura was still eating lunch herself and questioned whether she could not buy it personally. Kurowa sharply responded that he was speaking far too casually despite still being a rookie. She coldly remarked that she should wait until she was properly qualified before speaking to her that way. Narrowing her eyes at him, she further argued that she worked as hard as she did because of Sakura's lack of experience and sarcastically questioned whether the two of them planned to take over her responsibilities as well. Taken aback by her harsh tone, Yamazaki became visibly irritated and started to respond. However, Sakura quickly stood up and apologized repeatedly for causing trouble, insisting that she would go buy the lunch herself. Outside the office, Sakura thanked Yamasaki for accompanying her and admitted that she was unfamiliar with the area. Yamasaki brushed it off and explained that he had simply wanted some fresh air. Still, an uneasy feeling remained with him as he admitted that he did not particularly like Kurowa, remarking that she seemed like the type to abuse her authority. Hearing this, Sakura gently defended Kurowa by stating that she had been very kind earlier that morning and suggested that perhaps the issue was simply her own lack of skill at work. As they continued walking, news suddenly appeared on a nearby screen regarding the gruesome murders that had taken place at a law firm the previous month. The report announced that 13 people had been killed, including 9 lawyers. Due to the brutality of the murders, investigators still had difficulty identifying the exact weapon used, while the police reportedly had no leads regarding the culprits. After hearing the report, Yamasaki remarked that Japan had become far too dangerous lately, and wondered whether the incidents could possibly be linked to terrorism. He further mentioned that 10 people had apparently been killed at a clinic before the law firm incident as well. Later, back at the office, Kurowa shouted at Sakura, insisting that she had already explained the process several times before. She angrily pointed out that they were creating a free location picking list, not a fixed location one, and demanded that Sakura properly secure each file's traceability. Kurowa continued scolding her, questioning how many times she needed to repeat herself before Sakura would finally understand, to which Sakura immediately apologized. She mocked Sakura, questioning what she had even learned at university, before sarcastically asking whether she needed to start over from elementary school instead. At that moment, Kuzehara stepped in and calmly asked Kurowa to settle down. He explained that since Sakura still did not fully understand the company's products, he would personally guide her through the warehouse. After a brief pause, Kurowa agreed and stated that she would leave Sakura in his care. Hearing this, Sakura felt another wave of uneasiness at the thought of being alone with Kuzehara. Still, when Kuzehara called for her and suggested they head out, she quietly agreed. Once inside the warehouse, Kuzehara explained that the main warehouse was located elsewhere, though the inventory stored there would still help her learn most of the company's products. Looking around, Sakura became amazed by the large number of downed quilts stacked throughout the storage area. As she stepped forward to examine them, Kuzehara suddenly revealed a disturbing smile behind her, before abruptly grabbing her chest from behind, causing Sakura to scream in shock. Terrified, Sakura froze as Kuzehara coldly warned her not to raise her voice again. He quietly remarked that with a single word of his, a new employee like her could easily be fired. He further stated that such a thing would surely devastate her mother back in the countryside, especially after she had struggled alone to raise Sakura after her husband's death, and had even managed to send her to university, despite it being a third-rate one. Sakura trembled violently as tears gathered in her eyes. In this belief, she questioned how he knew such personal information about her. Kuzehara calmly replied that he had been watching her ever since training. He continued listing details about her life, mentioning her mother's health had been deteriorating, while her younger brother was currently preparing for his university entrance exams. Holding her even tighter, Kuzehara smiled disgustingly and remarked that since she wanted to make her mother happy, she simply needed to endure it quietly and remain still for him. Tears streamed from Sakura's eyes as fear overwhelmed her completely. Suddenly, a voice was heard from outside the warehouse. Someone opened the door and questioned whether everything was all right, mentioning that they thought they had heard a scream. Seizing the opportunity, Sakura immediately broke free from Kuzehara's grasp. Without looking back, she rushed out of the warehouse in panic. She glanced around desperately, only to realize that no one else was nearby. She hurried away from the area in panic. Meanwhile, inside the warehouse, Kuzehara cursed furiously, demanding to know who had interrupted him. Suddenly, a faint voice could be heard from outside the door. Kuzehara immediately tried to open it, only to realize that it had somehow been locked. Panic slowly crept over him as he noticed that the locking knob itself was gone. Terrified, Kuzehara shouted angrily, demanding that whoever was outside open the door at once. He screamed for Sakura, questioning whether she was still there and ordering her to hurry and unlock it. Convinced that someone was playing a prank on him, he continued cursing under his breath. However, from the darkness behind him, a massive shadow slowly emerged. It moved silently from the corner of the warehouse, gradually approaching him. Kuzehara continued yelling towards the door, warning that they would be willing to forgive them if they opened it immediately. He further threatened to fire whoever was responsible if they did not stop at once. The shadow quietly loomed closer behind him. As Kuzehara finally turned around, he was met with the horrifying sight of a gigantic monster standing there. The creature let out a disturbing laugh while revealing a grotesque smile, causing Kuzehara to break into terrified screams. While inside the women's restroom, Sakura trembled as tears streamed from her face. She couldn't calm herself after what had happened and remained shaken by the realization that Kuzehara had been that kind of person all along. After some time, she slowly stepped out of the restroom and wondered what she should do next. However, while walking through the lobby, she was startled to see the company president standing there. Noticing her, Mitsuhike gently questioned how her first day at work had been. He remarked that adjusting to a new environment must still feel difficult for her. Sakura hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. Then, Mitsuhike stated that everyone within the company is like family, connected by a strong bond. He encouraged her to trust her seniors and follow their guidance, assuring her that a joyful future would surely await her if she did so. Even after hearing his words, Sakura remained uncertain. Kuzehara's earlier threats echoed repeatedly in her mind, especially his remarks about her mother and family. Fear slowly overtook her thoughts as she convinced herself that she simply needed to endure everything for her mother's sake. She clenched her fists as she resolved to bear with it no matter what. Back inside the warehouse, a dirty Egawa Corporation storage box rested silently in the middle. Inside it was Kuzehara's twisted and mangled corpse, carelessly bundled within the box. A panel appears on the phone screen where a website asks if any unforgivable evil is lurking within the area. Then the enforcer of justice will take responsibility and purge the evil that has infested society. As the request is uploaded, the shadow gives an eerie smile. Later, at the office, Sakura approaches the desk when Kuro notices her. He remarks that she does not look very well and questions whether she is okay, to which she quietly assures him that she is fine. Takanashi asks about Kusehara, and Sakura, still disturbed by what he had done to her, replies that he will return soon as she takes her seat. Kuro observes that she seems a little down and suggests that they should go out drinking that night to relax, stating that it would be a good way to unwind. However, Sakura thanks him for the offer and explains that the day has been a little overwhelming for her. Kuro grows slightly annoyed and questions whether she simply doesn't want to spend time with them, asking if she perhaps has a date planned with her boyfriend. Hearing this, Sakura hesitantly denies having a boyfriend. Kuro then mentions that for future reference, he is curious about how many people she has dated so far. Takanashi interrupts, stating that he is being a little too forward. Kuro dismisses it, saying that it is only natural to want to know more about their cute junior. Sakura hesitantly admits that she has never been with anyone before, causing Kuro to cry out in surprise. He questions whether she has truly never gone out with anyone even once, remarking that it is incredibly rare. Kuro states that it is difficult to have an honest and deep conversation with people these days, and he considers it a serious issue within society. Mogi interrupts with a laugh, remarking that things are perfectly fine the way they are. He states that although it may not be ideal for society, a woman can simply get married and become a housewife. Then he calls out to Sakura, complimenting her appearance and warning her not to overwork herself, otherwise she might miss her chance to get married. Suddenly, Kurohara calls out sharply and scolds Mogi, questioning who he thinks he is speaking to. She points towards Sakura and questions how long she plans to stand around chatting with others. Giving Sakura a disgusted glare, Kurohara remarks that people like her are usually called salary thieves. Sakura is taken aback and a heavy silence fills the office. Kuro quickly stands up and remarks that since Kusehara is late, he might as well check on him during his smoke break. Kurohara informs Sakura that she will continue guiding her, to which Sakura quietly agrees. Sakura hesitantly types on the computer, but suddenly, Kurohara snaps at her, questioning how she could fail at something so simple and calling her useless. Sakura immediately apologizes as tears begin to gather in her eyes. At that moment, a memory from the past flashes through her mind. Her mother gently tells her that if things ever become too difficult, she can always come home. Sakura quietly accepts those words in her heart, reminding herself that this is simply how Tokyo is, and that she will not give up. Suddenly, Kuro comes running back into the office before collapsing to the floor with a terrified scream. Kurohara questions what happened and demands to know the reason for his sudden outburst. Trembling uncontrollably, Kuro calls for emergency help. He stutters as he explains that he had just gone to the warehouse and discovered that Kusehara is dead. Sakura and the others are left stunned. Gurowada questions whether this is some kind of joke, but Guro screams that he is serious. He explains that Kusehara had been stuffed inside a cardboard box and that somebody had killed him. The office immediately falls into panic as shocked murmurs spread throughout the room. People whisper amongst themselves in disbelief that somebody has been murdered. Mogi remarks that if Guro is telling the truth, then they need to call the police immediately. Otherwise, he must have gone insane. Guro hurriedly explains that his cell phone has no signal for some reason and that he cannot contact the police. Mogi quickly grabs the office telephone and states that he will use it instead. However, after trying it himself, he confirms that the line is disconnected as well. The others begin checking their own phones, only to realize that none of them are working either. Gurowada remarks that someone should check the General Affairs Department. Seeing the growing chaos inside the office, Sakura becomes deeply troubled and questions what exactly is happening. Scared out of his mind, Guro trembles knowing that he cannot handle the situation by himself and pleads for everyone to come with him to the warehouse. Upon arriving there, Mogi is unable to believe the horrifying sight before him. He warns the women that they should not look at something so terrible. Trembling, he remarks that Kusehara has truly been murdered. Gurowada and the others stare in disbelief, remarking that the scene is far too horrifying. Mogi shakily points out that all of Kusehara's bones appear to have been horribly crushed, questioning how anyone could have ended up in such a gruesome condition. Sakura trembles in fear and denies understanding who could possibly do something so cruel. Mogi suddenly points towards Sakura and remarks that the last person seen with Kusehara was Sakura. Turning towards her suspiciously, he states that she must know something about this. Sakura is left stunned by the accusation. Guro slowly remarks that now that he thinks about it, Sakura had been acting strangely when she returned alone from the warehouse earlier. Sakura quickly tries to deny it. Gurowada and Bakanashi exchange suspicious glances towards Sakura. At that moment, Yamasaki suddenly arrives from behind and tells everyone to calm down. He steps forward and looks at the gruesome scene himself. After examining the body, he remarks that there is no way a single girl could have done something like this alone. Then he questions Guro about the condition of the warehouse when the body was discovered. Guro explains that when he entered the warehouse, the door had already been opened and the cardboard box had been placed right inside. Mogi questions Yamasaki about his identity. Yamasaki casually replies that he is simply a new employee passing by and tells him not to mind him. He quietly repeats that the door had already been opened before walking toward it. Upon closer inspection, he notices that the locking knob has been removed. Sakura softly calls out to Yamasaki, and Yamasaki remarks that since the phones aren't working, they'll have to leave the building and report the incident directly to the police. As they leave the warehouse and head toward the elevator, they notice several employees already gathered there waiting anxiously. Yamasaki questions them about the situation and asks whether something is wrong. The employees explain that the elevators are no longer working. Gurowada and the others are left shocked, unable to understand how so many things could stop functioning at the same time. Yamasaki curses under his breath and remarks that he has a very bad feeling about the situation. He turns towards Sakura and questions whether she remembers the news report we saw earlier that afternoon. Sakura nods and questions whether he is referring to the story about the people who had been killed at the law firm. Yamasaki confirms it and explains that several similar incidents have occurred recently, yet the killer has still not been caught because of how unusual the murders are. He explains that every case ends with a gruesome crime scene and an unknown method of killing. According to the investigation reports, the police have not been able to find a single trace of the murderer, not even a weapon or fingerprints. He quietly remarks that it is almost as if the crimes were committed by a ghost. Yamasaki then adds that although it may sound unbelievable, once he heard the testimony of a survivor from one of those incidents. His expression darkens as he recalls how the survivor had trembled in fear while saying that it was not a person at all, but a monster. He then reveals that the monster's name was Kiriko. Sakura is visibly taken aback upon hearing the name Kiriko. Gurowada immediately questions what Yamasaki is even talking about, remarking that the entire thing sounds ridiculous. Mogi agrees, stating that right now our priority should be informing the police that somebody murdered Kusehara, and he asks Yamasaki to stop bringing up irrelevant stories. However, Yamasaki denies that it is irrelevant. He questions whether Kusehara could truly have been killed in such a horrifying manner by an ordinary human being. He remarks that the one responsible was something that was not human, and could possibly have been Kiriko. Kurohara quickly dismisses the idea, remarking that she doesn't care whether it's supposed to be a ghost or a monster, because such things don't exist. But Yamasaki firmly denies it and states that Kiriko definitely exists. He adds that even if it was not Kiriko specifically, it was still something beyond ordinary understanding. Kurohara finally loses her patience and sharply orders everyone to return to their desks. She remarks that the police should handle the murder, while the General Affairs Department deals with the communication problems. As she walks away, Bakanashi points out that the police can't even be contacted because the phones, internet, and elevators all have stopped working. Kurohara responds that they still have the emergency stairs, and states that she is going to report everything directly to the company president. Guro also mentions that he will head outside himself to contact the police, since there should still be signal beyond the building. Hearing all of this, Sakura quietly turns toward Yamasaki. Yamasaki remarks with concern that his explanation clearly didn't convince anyone, though he admits that he probably wouldn't have believed it either.
Back at the office, the atmosphere remains restless and uneasy. Mogi remarks that even the General Affairs Department is confused and still cannot determine the cause of the problems. Kurohara informs everyone that the president is currently on his way to inspect the crime scene. Takanashi tearfully questions why Kusehara had to die, remarking that he had always seemed like such a good person who cared deeply about his family. Mogi agrees that the murder is unforgivable and questions who could possibly have done such a thing. He remarks that it is difficult to believe this was the work of a random attacker and wonders whether somebody within the company could actually be responsible. He further adds that such a brutal method of killing resembles the work of a serial killer. At that moment, everyone turned toward the side as the company president arrives. Mitsuhiko, wearing a heavy expression, asks everyone to listen carefully. He announces that something both tragic and terrifying has occurred. He explains that Kusehara, the team leader, was murdered inside the company warehouse, and that at the same time, the mobile phones, landline connections, internet, and elevators all suddenly stopped functioning for unknown reasons. He acknowledges that nothing like this has ever happened since the company was founded, but he urges everyone to remain calm as the causes are currently being investigated. He assures them that the police will surely arrive soon and solve the case. Mitsuhiko further states that they are all like family, and he refuses to suspect any employee without reason. However, for the sake of the investigation, he requests that everyone remain inside the company building. He remarks that finding the criminal would be the best way to honor Kusehara's memory, and encourages everyone to overcome the crisis together through their strong bond as coworkers. His speech earns applause and words of agreement from the employees. Later, around 6 in the evening, tension continues to fill the office. Mogi remarks that it has already been nearly an hour since Guro went outside to contact the police. Kurohara mentions that the phones are still disconnected. She then calls out to Sakura, remarking that she wants to clear her mind a little, and asking her to prepare some coffee with a little sugar and no milk. The others also began requesting drinks. Sakura quietly heads toward the pantry and begins preparing the tea and coffee. While she is serving the drinks, Yamasaki suddenly enters from behind and remarks that the killer could still be somewhere nearby, yet everyone is casually asking her to make tea. He questions what the people in her department are even thinking. Sakura quietly replies that she would rather focus on something to distract herself. Tears slowly gather in her eyes as she admits that she cannot believe something so terrible happened on her very first day, and that she feels completely confused. She states that she would have never imagined a direct superior would be murdered like this. After a brief silence, Yamasaki questions whether she knows what kind of person Kusehara truly was. He explains that he does not mean to disrespect the dead, but wonders whether there might be a reason somebody resented him enough to kill him. At that moment, memories of what Kusehara did to her earlier flash through Sakura's mind. Yamasaki then remarks that a strange rumor has recently been spreading across the internet. According to the rumor, if someone has a person they cannot forgive, they can submit a request to Kiriko, who will judge their wickedness and kill them on the requester's behalf.
Sakura questions whether he's referring to Kiriko that he mentioned earlier. Yamasaki confirms it and explains that he searched extensively online and eventually found a suspicious website claiming that Kiriko would purge evil if a request was submitted. Yamasaki quietly remarks that it is probably nothing more than a prank created by someone online. However, he questions what would happen if the website were actually being used to encourage real murders. If that were true, then the person who requested Kusehara's death could still be somewhere inside the company. He adds that the most frightening possibility is that the creator of the website might somehow be controlling Kiriko. Sakura questions what Kiriko actually is and asks why Yamasaki has been researching it so obsessively. For a moment, Yamasaki hesitates before finally revealing that he once had a sister who was 9 years older than him. He explains that 1 year ago, his sister attended a class reunion at an abandoned school. The reunion also marked the 17th death anniversary of a former classmate named Setsuko Wakumura, a girl who had taken her own life during middle school because of severe bullying. Yamasaki explains that on that same day, heavy rain caused a landslide that swallowed part of the mountainside school, killing 4 of his sister's former classmates in the disaster. He quietly remarks that although his sister narrowly escaped with her life, she returned home completely changed. As time passed, she gradually became more terrified of something unseen, until she eventually locked herself inside her room. Yamasaki reveals that whenever he tried calling out to her and asking her to eat, she would only tremble in fear while repeatedly apologizing to Setsuko and begging for forgiveness. She even covered the walls with desperate apologies while claiming that Kiriko had killed everyone. Yamasaki quietly concludes that Kiriko is most likely the embodiment of Setsuko's hatred. He then reveals, with visible pain, that his sister eventually took her own life in order to escape from that terror. Ever since then, Yamasaki has been researching everything connected to Kiriko, though he never expected the company he had just joined to become involved with something like this. He quietly remarks that he only hopes the tragedy ends with a single victim. Yamasaki then suggests that they should return and think of some countermeasures before anyone else gets hurt. Sakura quietly agrees and tells him that if there is anything she can do to help, he should feel free to ask her. As the two leave the kitchen and walk down the hallway together, an enormous monster slowly follows behind them in silence, wearing an eerie smile. The monster tries to grab Sakura, but suddenly she feels something horrifying behind her. As she turned around, yet saw nothing there. Yamasaki questioned what was wrong, but Sakura dismissed it, stating that it was nothing as they walked toward the office desk. At the office, Mogi remarked that regardless of the circumstances, Kudo was far too late. He stated that something must have happened to him on the way to the police station. He further explained that, aside from the murder, all forms of communication had been cut off and even the elevators had stopped working. Everything about the situation was far too strange, and this was not the time to sit around waiting for a police investigation. Takanashi questioned what he meant, but Yamazaki stepped in, stating that he felt the same way. He remarked that the killer might still be hiding somewhere inside the company, making the building dangerous. He suggested that everyone should leave through the emergency stairs. However, Kurowa interrupted, questioning who exactly he was to question it. She remarked that the president had instructed them to remain there, and if everyone stayed together, the culprit would not be able to attack anyone. She added that the police should arrive shortly. More importantly, she called out to Sakura, coldly reminding her that the customer list still needed to be typed before the end of the day. She glared at her and remarked that if the work was not completed, she would not be allowed to go home. Sakura was left quite taken aback. Yamazaki exclaimed that she could not seriously still be worried about that at a time like this. Kurowa immediately responded that useless rookies like him should remain quiet. However, Kurowa suddenly felt something strange inside her coffee. She glanced at the cup and noticed a tiny figure slowly climbing out of it. The small sailor suit figurine stared directly at her. Kurowa screamed and threw away the cup. Mogi quickly questioned what was wrong with her. Trembling in fear, Kurowa muttered that something small wearing a sailor suit had just stared at her. Suddenly, something moved inside her body. Without warning, everyone froze in shock. Moments later, a gigantic monster now stood in the middle of the office. Seeing the horrifying scene, everyone froze in terror. Clenching his teeth, Yamazaki shouted that it was Kiriko, ordering everyone to run. Chaos immediately erupted as the employees desperately fled in every direction. Kiriko slowly approached Sakura. Sakura stood frozen in fear, unable to move, as Kiriko extended her arm with a smile before swinging it violently. At that moment, Yamazaki had pulled Sakura down and saved her from the attack. He urgently ordered her to run. The surviving employees rushed through the hallway in panic, questioning what that monster even was. Yamazaki grabbed Sakura, stating that it truly was Kiriko. As they hurried through the hallway, they noticed Takanashi lying on the floor. They quickly approached her, asking if she was all right. Takanashi stuttered that she had been pushed over, but remarked that she was merely reaping what she had sown, and that the entire situation was her fault, leaving both Yamazaki and Sakura confused. However, the dreadful screams echoing from the office caused Yamazaki to immediately ask whether she could stand, warning that Kiriko was coming. Suddenly, large masses peeled out from the office and crashed onto the floor. A hand slowly emerged from the office. Then, Kiriko stepped out, turning toward them with a smile. As Kiriko glanced to the side, only to find the hallway completely empty, there was no one else in sight. In the meantime, Yamazaki, Sakura, and Takanashi had hidden themselves inside the meeting room. Kiriko slowly stepped into the hallway, whispering a name under her breath. As she passed by the room where the others were hiding, she softly called out a name, Ryosuke. After a moment of silence, Yamazaki carefully remarked that it looks like she had left. Sakura remained trembling beside him as she questioned what that thing even was. She hesitantly asked if that was the same Kiriko he had spoken about earlier. Yamazaki quietly affirmed it, stating that the creature before them was the same thing that had driven his sister and her 4 classmates to death. For a moment, he referred to it as a horrifying apparition, though he quickly corrected himself, stating that it was a monster. Tears slowly gathered in Sakura's eyes as she muttered that Kiriko had truly killed Kusehara, Kurowa, and all the other employees. She questioned why something like this was happening to them. Before anyone could respond, Takanashi suddenly broke into sobs. Through her tears, she repeatedly apologized. She admitted that she was the one who had summoned Kiriko there in the first place. Yamazaki immediately questioned whether she had used that mysterious website. Takanashi asked if he knew about it already. She explained that she had never expected something this horrible to happen. When she first discovered the site, she had thought about using it because it claimed that it would purge evil from society. Before Sakura had joined the company, she had already developed resentment towards 2 people within the office, the persistent Kusehara and Kurowa. Takanashi admitted that she had already reached her limit. In desperation, she had used the website and requested the removal of Kusehara and Kurowa. She acknowledged that the website had appeared suspicious from the beginning, so she hadn't entirely believed in it. However, at the same time, it had been the only thing left for her to rely on. Yamazaki responded that she should have spoken to the president or found another solution. He remarked that there had to be a better way to handle everything. However, Takanashi immediately replied that she had already tried speaking to him before. According to her, the president had simply dismissed everything she said. He claimed that his employees would never behave in such a manner and insisted that love and family bonds should always guide them. Takanashi screamed through her tears that she never wanted the entire company to be destroyed. She insisted that she never imagined an actual monster would appear there. Yamazaki fell silent for a moment before stating that it's difficult to believe Kiriko acted entirely on her own. He reasoned that there had to be someone controlling the website from behind the scenes and using Kiriko to carry out murders. He questioned Takanashi, asking her if she had ever communicated directly with the person responsible for the site. Takanashi shook her head and denied it. She explained that after sending her request, she had only received a short message informing her that her request had been accepted. Yamazaki cursed under his breath, questioning who could possibly be behind all of this and what their true purpose is. After a short pause, he carefully peeked outside the room. The hallway appeared empty once again. He immediately stated that remaining there any longer was too dangerous. According to him, the emergency staircase was their only remaining escape route. Without wasting another second, the group rushed out of the meeting room and hurried toward the stairs. However, unnoticed by them, Kiriko was already clinging to the ceiling above, silently watching their every movement. As they ran, Takahashi suddenly felt an unsettling presence behind her. She instinctively turned around, only for Kiriko to violently crash into her. Yamasaki immediately screamed at Sakura not to turn around and to keep running no matter what happened. Sakura cried out Takahashi's name in horror, but Yamasaki shouted that stopping now would only get them killed. He insisted that the stairs were their only chance to survive. According to him, if they could just make it downstairs, they might still be able to escape outside. However, the moment they reached the lower level, both of them froze. A horrifying scene spread before their eyes. The sight was so horrifying that Yamasaki could barely process what he was seeing. He questioned what the hell had happened there. At that moment, they noticed movement nearby. Mogi, standing beside, explained that those bodies belonged to the employees who had attempted to escape after the elevator stopped functioning. Gudo was among the dead as well. Mogi explained that Gudo had ended up there after attempting to report Guzehara's murder to the police. He questioned whether the monster had done all of this too. Tears gathered in Mogi's eyes as he apologized to Gudo. He bitterly remarked that he had failed to protect him. According to him, everyone inside the building had become completely trapped. No matter how long they waited, help would never arrive. Mogi questioned what kind of monster Kiriko truly was and why it had come specifically to this company. Yamasaki slowly stated that this proved Kiriko's goal had never been limited to murdering only a few individuals. From the very beginning, her true objective must have been the destruction of the entire company itself. While at the president's office, terrified employees continuously pounded against the door while desperately pleading for him to open it. They shouted that it was an emergency, explaining that everyone on the lower floors had suddenly been slaughtered by a monster. Inside the office, he remarked that the employees were being unnecessarily loud. He questioned whether they had all gone insane for claiming that a monster had appeared inside the company. He coldly remarked that it seemed the fools needed proper retraining. On the other side, Mogi questions why Kiriko would do that, to which Yamasaki replies that she must have recognized the entire Egao Corporation as an evil of society. Sakura questions what that means, referring to what was written on the website, to which Yamasaki affirms that it stated that the enforcer of justice, Kiriko, would purge the evil that had infested society. Last month, 13 people were killed at a law firm. It was a corrupt firm that charged multiple debtors inflated legal fees. Before that, 10 people were murdered at a malicious clinic. They performed unscientific treatments that were covered by insurance and then demanded outrageous medical fees from patients. Both places were purged by Kiriko as evils of society. Mogi is left shocked, stating that if that's the case, then she must be after this company for the same reason. They quickly run toward the management room. However, as they step inside, they are horrified by the sight before them. Yamasaki remarks that Kiriko has been there as well, stating that this department, though he shouldn't say it, doesn't really seem like a department of Egao Corporation employees. Mogi states that it was probably an information management department in name only, while in reality, it was a department for committing telephone fraud, shocking Sakura. He affirms that it's the first time he's actually seen it himself. Before all of this, there had been vague rumors that the president had ties to Yakuza and was using Egao Corporation as a front company. Yamasaki elaborates that it was a company used to fund a criminal organization, and it seems that many of the employees working there were unaware of it. He further adds that Egao Corporation mainly provided multi-level marketing for health food products, and while such practices themselves were not illegal, the company had also engaged in malicious solicitation to recruit members and held health seminars to pressure elderly people into buying quilts and consumer electronics at inflated prices. In that sense, they had been directly complicit in evil. They might have been judged and purged as targets, leaving Mogi and Sakura petrified. Suddenly, Yamasaki screams that regardless of everything, they need to figure out how to escape from Kiriko because, at this stage, she would truly kill all of them. However, Sakura points out that there are no other exits. Suddenly, Yamasaki remembers that Kiriko had been whispering a name. He quietly murmurs the name, Ryosuke. Yamasaki asks them to remember the story he told about the landslide that occurred during his sister's class reunion a year ago. 4 people were caught in it and died, but he adds that it probably wasn't an accident. Those 4 people had likely been killed by Kiriko, and his sister's suicide note was proof. Only his sister and one other person survived the reunion. His name was Ryosuke Hayama, and Kiriko kept murmuring his name repeatedly. Yamasaki concludes that she must be emotionally attached to him. If that's true, then perhaps they could use her attachment to Ryosuke to break free from Kiriko's curse. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the halls, ordering everyone to run away. A guard rushes in, warning them that the floor is dangerous and that Kiriko is already there. Yamasaki immediately states that they should head to the upper floor for the time being. While numerous employees are banging desperately on Mitsuhiko's door, pleading for him to open it, questioning what they were supposed to do, Mitsuhiko finally opens a door and questions what is happening, asking everyone why they're in such a hurry and telling them to calm down. However, the employees scream that this is no time to relax because almost all of the employees on the lower floors have been killed. Mitsuhiko is shocked and questions about the identity of the culprit. The employees explain that it's some bizarre monster wearing a sailor suit and question if he knows anything about it. Mitsuhiko questions if what they're saying is true. At that moment, Yamasaki and the others rush toward him. Mitsuhiko attempts to dismiss everything as a bad joke, but Yamasaki firmly states that at this rate, all of them will be killed by Kiriko and asks him if there's any escape route besides the emergency stairs. Mitsuhiko remarks that even they are talking about monsters now and questions if they're filming some sort of prank. However, Mogi orders him to stop joking around, stating that it's because of his corrupt company that so many employees have died. He cries that Guro was his son, and now he would never even have lunch with him again. Mogi screams that the president should at least risk his own life to protect his employees, as that's his final duty as a company president. Cornered, Mitsuhiko quietly affirms that this is how it is. He claims that Mogi was a monster and suddenly points the gun at him, catching everyone off guard. Mitsuhiko begins hallucinating Kiriko within Mogi's body. In fear, he hears the monster saying that he truly had ties with the Yakuza. As Mogi tries to approach him, the terrified Mitsuhiko orders him to stay away. He suddenly fires several bullets at Mogi, shocking the employees. As Mogi collapses to the floor, Yamasaki screams and questions the president about what he's done. Mitsuhiko, breathing heavily, insists that Mogi was a monster, and that if he hadn't killed him, he would have been killed instead. Suddenly, small figurine-like creatures begin emerging. Tiny versions of Kiriko crawl out one after another. Seeing this, Yamasaki couldn't believe what he was witnessing as the numerous little figurines surrounded Mogi's entire body while repeatedly screaming the name Ryosuke. Numerous little figurines envelop Mogi's body as they continuously whisper Ryosuke's name, leaving everyone frozen upon witnessing the horrific scene before them. Seeing the dreadful scene, Mitsuhiko tries to shoot at them, but the figurines dodge the bullets with ease. They leap upon the employees and begin attacking them relentlessly. Taking the chance, Mitsuhiko rushes inside his office and shuts the door while Yamasaki and Sakura run off. They attempt to head upstairs, only to discover that the floor is locked. Sakura screams that all the floors have been sealed off and that they can't get in, to which Yamasaki remarks that they'll have to head to the rooftop. As they move upward, they encounter a security guard. He informs them that he unlocked the door and urges them to hurry. While inside the office, Mitsuhiko trembled in fear, questioning what the monster is and what exactly is happening. He wonders if that thing truly killed all his employees and why it is targeting his company. Mogi's earlier words echo in his mind, claiming that so many employees died because of his corrupt company. Mitsuhiko angrily screams that those fools never even knew how to use money properly, and that he had merely been providing quality products to stimulate Japan's economy. Suddenly, he glances downward and notices several figurines crawling onto his pants. Within moments, he is completely overwhelmed by them. They climb onto his face, into his mouth, and pierce through his eyes. Trembling in terror, Mitsuhiko is made to insert his gun into his mouth and pulls the trigger to kill himself. On the rooftop, Sakura whispers that the phone is still out of range and questions what they should do, stating that there is nowhere left to run. Yamasaki remarks that there must be another route somewhere. He calls out to the security guard, questioning how he managed to get to that floor, to which the guard casually replies that he simply happened to be patrolling there. Suddenly, Sakura looks behind him and notices Kiriko looming silently behind the guard. Alarmed, Sakura screams at the security guard, warning him that Kiriko is behind him. However, immediately, Yamasaki stops her, telling her not to go near him because he will be fine. The three stand in silence as Kiriko remains motionless behind the guard. Sakura, confused, remarks that Kiriko is not attacking him, to which Yamasaki affirms that the guard did not even react to her presence. He states that he cannot believe he would appear here disguised as a security guard, recognizing him as Ryosuke Hayama. Sakura questions him in confusion. Yamasaki explains that Ryosuke was one of the survivors from the class reunion incident 1 year ago, but 2 months ago he suddenly went missing. Shortly afterward, Ryosuke's company boss died under suspicious circumstances. At first, Yamasaki believed Ryosuke had committed suicide like his sister because he could not escape Kiriko's curse. However, after discovering the website, his thoughts changed. Using Kiriko's curse to kill people could only have been done by one person, and that is Ryosuke, the same classmate Kiriko never killed. Taking a brief pause, Ryosuke removes his cap and remarks that Yamasaki investigated quite deeply into the matter. He calmly compliments him as Kiriko wraps her arms around him from behind. Ryosuke admits that he had Kiriko kill all of them. He explains that he operated the website and gathered requests for murders. Afterwards, he personally judged which places deserved to be eradicated before sending Kiriko there. Ryosuke remarks that it had been years since they last saw each other as children, and he never expected his face alone would expose him. Yamasaki explains that something about the very first murder always felt unnatural to him. The warehouse's locking knob had been removed, the elevators did not function, and the shutters on every floor had been sealed shut. He never believed Kiriko would have done any of those things herself. It all suggested that someone had been working behind the scenes to ensure that nobody escaped. He continues by stating that Ryosuke, when had joined them earlier, he immediately warned them that the floor was dangerous and that Kiriko was approaching. How could an ordinary security guard possibly know about Kiriko? Admitting that it was at that moment he realized the truth. Although he desperately did not want to believe it, Ryosuke was the only person who came to mind. Yamasaki then questions where the kind person Ryosuke once was had disappeared to, asking why he had turned into a crazed murderer. With a faint smile, Ryosuke remarks that it's understandable for Yamasaki to think of him that way, but he insists that he is not insane. In fact, it is precisely because his mind is calm and clear that he is capable of carrying out these actions. Ryosuke explains that he once killed Kiriko, correcting himself by stating that it was Setsuko Okumura and it happened accidentally. Soon afterward, Setsuko transformed into the demonic spirit known as Kiriko and murdered the 4 students who had bullied her in school. However, Kiriko spared both him and his sister, Mizuho. At first, they believed that Kiriko had forgiven them, yet 1 month later, Mizuho committed suicide because Kiriko had continued to watch over both of them endlessly, ensuring that they suffered for eternity. Ryosuke states that he could never escape her, believing it to be his punishment for creating Kiriko in the first place. He explained that he eventually abandoned everything, but over time he came to realize that he needed to atone for his sins. Ryosuke stated that the country was rotting from within, and he concluded that if he used Kiriko to exterminate the wickedness spreading throughout society, then perhaps a better future could be created. Declaring that he intends to change Japan along with Kiriko, Ryosuke states that this is his form of atonement. Yamasaki screams in disbelief, questioning what Ryosuke is doing and stating that it is nothing but murder. He urges him to wake up. Ryosuke calmly replies that he already has awakened. He explains that the day Kiriko killed his incompetent boss was the day he realized that removing evil people purified the atmosphere around society. According to him, eliminating the filth of society would eventually cleanse the country itself. He admits that he understands this will be an endless journey, yet Kiriko approves of his noble ambition and continues working alongside him. He further remarks that he is certain that Mizuho is watching over them from heaven. Yamasaki groans at him, questioning whether Ryosuke truly believes his sister would be pleased to see them murdering innocent people. Ryosuke denies that it is murder, insisting that it is purification. He states that once Kiriko's influence spreads throughout society, she will become a deterrent against evil itself. Ryosuke then remarks that he wishes to entrust one of them with the important responsibility of spreading Kiriko's message to the world in order to shock society. As he signals towards Kiriko, something suddenly emerges from her mouth and she spits it towards them. Yamasaki and Sakura are shocked to recognize it as the president's gun. Ryosuke states that he does not require 2 witnesses. He instructs them to use the gun, promising that he will spare the survivor. However, if neither of them acts, he will simply decide himself who dies. He coldly warns them that if they attempt to shoot him instead, both of them will be killed. Since there's only one gun, he remarks that the faster person will survive. Yamasaki refuses, accusing Ryosuke of forcing them to kill each other and asking just how far Ryosuke has fallen. Suddenly, Sakura grabs the gun and points it towards Yamasaki. Ryosuke remarks that it's a brave decision. However, to his surprise, Sakura slowly hands the gun over to Yamasaki instead. Smiling gently, she asks Yamasaki to shoot her, stating that she wants him to survive. Ryosuke urges Yamasaki to end her life with his own hands. After a brief pause, Yamasaki quietly states that he will end this. Grabbing the gun, Yamasaki suddenly charges towards Ryosuke. Ryosuke remarks that it's unfortunate timing. Kiriko immediately attempts to slash Yamasaki apart, but he narrowly dodges his attack and slides past Kiriko to seize Ryosuke as a hostage. Yamasaki states that Kiriko appears to obey Ryosuke's commands. Holding him firmly, Yamasaki demands that Ryosuke order Kiriko never to harm Sakura in the future again. Ryosuke reluctantly gives the order. Yamasaki slowly steps backward while holding Ryosuke. Reaching the edge, Yamasaki tells Ryosuke that they used to play together often as children. He admits that he cannot ask Ryosuke to return to the person he once was anymore, but he can ask him to die alongside him. Without any hesitation, Yamasaki leaps off the rooftop while dragging Ryosuke down with him. Sakura screams in horror as both of them fall. At that very moment, Kiriko suddenly transforms into a gigantic monster. Roaring furiously for Ryosuke, she smashes through the building with overwhelming force. The entire structure begins to collapse into pieces as Sakura falls along with the falling debris. In that instant, Ryosuke whispers something to Kiriko. In response, Kiriko extends her enormous arm while the building continues to collapse, completely shattering the remains of the structure. As the smoke slowly clears, Yamasaki and Sakura find themselves lying safely on Kiriko's massive hand. Both of them stare upward in shock, realizing that Kiriko saved them. Ryosuke calls out to Yamasaki, remarking that he genuinely admired his willingness to sacrifice himself to stop him. Because of that resolve, he decides to make an exception and spare both of them as witnesses. Smiling calmly, Ryosuke declares that as long as evil exists in this world, Kiriko will continue killing. He orders them to spread that message to society for him. Moments later, Kiriko carries Ryosuke away as they leap out and soar through the sky. Yamasaki clenches his teeth in frustration, realizing that if someone as deluded as Ryosuke continues to control Kiriko, all of Japan may eventually be destroyed. Veins bulge across his face as he firmly declares that he has made up his mind. No matter what it takes, he will find Ryosuke and kill him. Afterwards, he vows to erase Kiriko from the face of the earth. 1 month later, news articles report that 207 people were killed in a massive terrorist attack. Meanwhile, Ryosuke scoffs that the country's police force is truly incompetent, as they still have not realized that Kiriko is responsible. Sitting calmly, he admits that Yamasaki may already be pursuing him, meaning they must act faster. In order to create a better society, Ryosuke declares that they must destroy the most rotten part of the country first. Standing before the gigantic Kiriko, Ryosuke orders her to kill them all, declaring that it is finally time to change Japan